British had formed their flour bag fort, and they put their wounded in there. The flour bag fort was just a position where they were keeping their wounded so that they wouldn't be hit by stray bullets or anything like that. They didn't fight from it. They formed a circle the whole way around the top of the hill. Now, Bouquet had about 450 men in his force, and he had about 350 pack horses with him. So he's got to keep those pack horses safe. Those pack horses are the most important part of his force in a lot of ways, because he's trying to get that food that they're carrying to Fort Pitt. And the Native Americans are obviously trying to stop him. Now, the Native Americans do not completely encircle the British. They form a horseshoe around the British, and they leave the end of that horseshoe open, and that would be facing towards the east. Now, they do this for a couple of reasons. One is because if the British want to go somewhere, the east is open, and they can head back towards where they came from, and they don't make it any further to Fort Pitt. The other reason is that if you completely surround your enemy, you force them to fight you. Native Americans, maybe surprisingly to some of you, don't necessarily want to fight. They just want to stop the British from getting to Fort Pitt. So if they can do that without fighting, or with doing as little fighting as possible, they're victorious. So they encourage the British to leave by not making them fight. If you're completely surrounded, you have to fight to get out. If you have an opening, you might take it. In addition to that, if they can encourage the British to start fleeing, it will be easier to fight them. Obviously, it's a lot easier to fight somebody whose muskets are pointing in the opposite direction. So that's their goal, is to get the British to flee. The first part of the action took place at about 1 o'clock in the afternoon of August 5th. The British pretty quickly realized that they weren't going to make it up that hill down there, and they retreated up to this hill. And then they fought up here in this circle that I'm telling you about against the Native Americans for the rest of that day. The battle lines were fairly static. While individual soldiers may have moved up and down the hill on both sides, with the Native Americans pushing up and then the British chasing them back down, the overall position of the armies did not change very much during the rest of that day. Now, these British soldiers marched here overnight. It took them about 24 hours to get here from Fort Ligonier to march the 25 miles. They marched overnight. They didn't have much rest. They're about a mile away from where they're going to be able to get some more water. So they're all tired. They're all thirsty. They're all marching around in those woolen jackets that you probably saw them wearing in the camps. They're not very far away from where they're expecting to get water, so they probably don't have much left in their canteens. And that's how they begin the battle at 1 o'clock. They fight until sundown. The Native Americans stop fighting at night because at the time it was pretty dangerous, so they probably have about 7 hours of fighting in at that point. And then, after posting some sentries, the British would sleep in their position on their arms, if they could sleep. And then as soon as the sun comes up the next day, the fighting starts all over again. The commander of the British force, Henry Bouquet, doesn't know exactly how he's going to extricate his men from this position. As a matter of fact, he's written a letter the night before, during the night, to his commanding officer, General Amherst, to the effect that he expects his force to be wiped out that day. He doesn't know how many Native Americans he's facing. He has a force of about 450 men. He's probably suffered most of the casualties that he's going to suffer during this battle in the first hour or so of the fighting. In all, we don't know exactly when the casualties occurred, but in all he loses 110 people killed and wounded and missing. So that's about a quarter of his force. And like I said, he's probably lost a lot of them by the morning of the second day of the battle. So to extricate himself, he's going to have some pretty creative plan, because the British are used to losing to the Native Americans when they're fighting them on their own ground. So now we're going to witness exactly how the British did extricate themselves from this situation. You'll see the back and forth of combat as our British soldiers and our Native Americans advance and retreat on each other. And then you'll see what Henry Bouquet is planning on doing to get himself out of this mess he finds himself in.
You can't see the one down there. There you go.
I know, but I still like to ask.
It's being a ladder.
Nothing was on top of this.
All these people taking selfies.
Hey, Louis, you see that thing? Take a video?
the British advanced, the natives would retreat. Europeans at the time mistook this for cowardice. They the Native Americans displayed an unmanly desire not to get killed during warfare. The reality of the situation is more complex. The European soldier was a specialist as a soldier. He didn't have any other roles. The Native American soldier was also a farmer, also a hunter. He was responsible for a lot of different things in his tribe. When the Europeans lost a soldier, they just lost that. When the natives lost a soldier, they lost a lot more in their society. So they had to be very careful of their lives. It wasn't really worth proving some political point for somebody to get killed. They almost had to be sure that they were going to win before they put their lives in risk in battle.
Well, I'll send out 100,000. Oh, okay.
When the British advance, they can only go so far. We have to remember that what we're seeing here is a line, but it's part of a larger line that would be a complete circle around the top of this hill. When part of the line advances, it weakens that part of the line because the Native Americans, if they go too far, could slip in behind them. If they then get behind that one part of the line, they're in the rear of the entire British Army. So the British can only advance so far before they have to retreat back to maintain the coherency of their formation. That's why we see them moving back after going so far forward. Now we can see here what the British are doing in response to the Native Americans' almost complete insurrection. They've retreated some portion of their line through to the area behind where there's no Native Americans. As they retreat, the Native Americans feel confident about their ability because they see part of the British pull away. What they don't see is that the British had moved behind a portion of the hill and had reformed there where there were no Native Americans. The Native Americans then pressed in on that part, and the British flanked them when they weren't looking that direction. This is enough to destroy the coherency of the Native American force. And after that first flanking fire and a subsequent bayonet charge, the Native Americans are dispersed. And they flee all the way back. This effectively ends the siege of Fort Pitt, as the Native American force in western Pennsylvania melts back to its homes in Ohio and further west into Michigan. While it was a victory for the British, it was a very costly one. As I mentioned, Bouquet lost about 25% of his force. In a European battle, a loss of 10% in your force would be considered a massacre. Still, it was a victory, and Henry Bouquet was lauded greatly for his role in defeating the Native Americans here. This is one of the first times the British had ever been able to do what they did here. Henry Bouquet was a Swiss mercenary in British service, and according to his terms of his contract when he was hired, he was not allowed to rise above the rank of colonel. After this battle, the British appreciated his service and appreciated what he did here and the cleverness of his plan in defeating the Native Americans, that they broke their own rules and promoted him to the rank of general. This battle, while it breaks the Native American force that's sieging Fort Pitt, does not end the entire war, however. The British were mauled so badly here that while it took them only 1 day to march here, they're going to take them 4 days to march from here to Fort Pitt, which is basically the same distance that they marched to get here. So they're going to march 25 miles in 1 day on the way here and about 25 miles in 4 days on the way back. They were very heavily beat up after this battle. Bouquet is going to have lost, of course, some of his horses during this encounter, so anything that he can't transport with him, he's going to burn on the field of battle so it doesn't fall into the Native American hands if they should come back through the battlefield. When Henry Bouquet gets to Fort Pitt, as I mentioned, he wasn't feeling confident enough to continue the fight against the Native Americans. He's not going to feel like he's strong enough to do that until the fall of the following year. So it takes more than a year after this battle for the British to get an army strong enough to march into Ohio and end this war permanently. Now that they're marching back to camp victoriously, they're going to stop on the way in the hill behind you and demonstrate a bayonet charge. So as soon as they get out here, if you guys would like to stick around and watch that, you're more than welcome to do so.
Like somebody having 2 6-shooters and his sign when he's not.
If I'm right, the British captain in the very dark red coat, you see him? He's been doing this for as long as I've been in Pittsburgh. I remember when he got his commission, medal.
Oh, yeah.
They gave him the sash. He's probably as old as I am.
To the left.
If they're going to charge us, too bad.
getting ready to do the charge, bud. You wanna watch?
You got your little sign. That's the best.
I've lost the eyes in my head, back of my head, because my kids were.
Okay, babe. Run.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Hope you enjoyed our little demonstration. Thank you. But one thing we did not get to show you, due to some interesting regulations, was what actually turned the tide of this battle. Cold steel, bayonets, and swords. Oddly enough, we can't do it against the natives. However, because of my confidence in my men, we can show you this demonstration. Please do not move from the line. Hard for your safety. Battalion! Battalion!
For the button.
Go, bayonet! Waist high! Huzzah!
Charged it.
To the front! Run! March!
Yeah, I did. It's kind of action.
Dresses line! Shoulder up! Bayonets! Support y'all!
Support your
Bayonets!
bayonets.
That's an example of a British bayonet charge. How many of you were a little uneasy? Imagine that, 500 men, or what the Army here was, about 450 men, coming at those men in the woods. Nothing you want to stand up to, is it?
Nope.
My confidence in these men allows me to do what we just did. They're well trained. They are, by far, the best troops I've ever had the pleasure and privilege of commanding. 3 cheers for the King's forces. Hip hip. Hooray! Hip hip. Hooray! Hip hip. Hooray! And 3 cheers for our good King George. Hip hip. Huzzah! Hip hip. Huzzah! Hip hip. Huzzah! And 3 cheers to our gallant foes in the woods. Hip hip. Huzzah! Hip hip. Huzzah! Hip hip. Huzzah! Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to remove ourselves. If you care to see us at our camp, please do so. Enjoy the day. We hope you've enjoyed your visit here.
Take care.
Do y'all.
There was one this morning and then there was one this afternoon.
Shoulder.
I represented 2 different engagements in the force event.
Front. March.
Yeah, I think so. I'm kind of later how he was in Washington for Washington's Army and stuff like that. We already get a little bit into it and stuff.
We can check out the tents and stuff.
Yeah.